And now, from San Francisco and the UCSF Rosenman Institute, the Health Technology Podcast with your host, Christine Winoto.
Our guest today is Jon Bloom, CEO and co-founder of Podimetrics. Podimetrics help patients prevent diabetic food complications by combining their cutting-edge technology with best-in-class care management services. Jon shared his journey with me from medicine to entrepreneurship over the past 15 plus years, including the moment he discovered his passion and drive to advance technology and medicine to prevent foot amputation in diabetes patients. Jon is a trained anesthesiologist, and he completed his residency at Mass Gen. He was also director of global medical affairs at Covidien before he started Podimetrics. Here is my conversation with Jon. Well, thank you, Jon, for joining me this afternoon. I assume you are hunkering down in Boston, East Coast.
It's funny. I am an absolute hermit these days. We hang inside. We have a new kid, so it's been actually been a great time to be a father. Normally, I'd probably be in the office, and now I get to, change him a lot more and get more time with him.
That's great. Congratulations. How old is your baby?
He's now 11 weeks old. So
oh, wow. You are a brand new dad. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. I don't know if you can see, but I still have the look of cluelessness on my face. It's still there. I'm still feel totally ill-equipped, but it's been a blast.
That's great. Firstborn, first baby?
Yes.
Boy, girl?
A boy. Carter Daewon Bloom.
Well, time flies. People used to tell me that, they grew up fast. I was like, yeah, right. Yes. It doesn't feel like that when you have an 11 weeks old baby, but now I have a 14 years old. It does flew by fast. But anyway, congratulations. I'm glad that you take advantage of the pandemic, being home to spend more time with your family. But you've been busy. You've been getting a lot of things done with the progress that you made with Podimetrics. Maybe you can start a little bit how you started your journey and how you end up with Podimetrics. It's kind of serendipity a little bit, right? That story is not like you plan along, but maybe can tell us a bit your background.
Sure. This one I can get cooking for a while. It's not a linear path. I'll just super summarize what it took to get to healthcare, because that in and of itself, I was a musician for a while, did a bunch of stuff. Once I realized, though, that healthcare was this wonderful place where you could make a difference, you could have the impact, and it's such a powerful thing to be able to hold someone's hand and try to help them through a scary moment. That was a big moment in my life, and I just remember going to medical school. I can already tell it was maybe a little bit different than a lot of the other students. Where we created this little after school club. We called it the Tech Club. And we knew that we kept talking about how the tech infrastructure of the university was antiquated. And we want to think about how we bring more tech into the school. And that ended up being my brother. Our first startup is we ended up organizing then as the technology committee of the school, and then we rebuilt their infrastructure. And I loved the.
Is this when you're an undergraduate?
This is in medical school at this point.
I
probably should just be learning about head and neck anatomy and stick to that stuff. I'm suddenly becoming obsessed with how these websites talk to each other, and they were just chaotic. And I'm tech stupid in many ways. Like, I'm not the engineer, I'm not coding, but I loved talking to the administration and figuring out how did it need to work, and talking to the students. And I got the bug. That's when I first got the bug, was I'm just a student. And I ended up going to, just like when I went to medical school, knowing I was going to be a surgeon, I came out an anesthesiologist. Actually, I'll come back to that in a second. Anesthesia just blew me away. It was like I was wired to be like an anesthesiologist. And I went to Mass General specifically because they had all these tech entrepreneurs walk around the halls. And another like fateful moment in my life, one of my attendings was the chief medical officer of Covidien. And I remember this day, we're at the MRI suites, and I think it was a pediatric case. And I'm telling him what I now know to be terribly naive thoughts in healthcare. And he gave me his pitch to come over to be his global medical director. And that was, I guess, the next major shift is now I thought it was going to be
so what you're saying, when you met your friend who is the person at Covidien, I mean, you have an idea that you have in mind that you've been cooking, or is more at that time you're trying to explore like, hey, what else besides being a doctor, how I can make an impact? And you mentioned earlier about that you wanted to become a surgeon, but you end up choosing the anesthesiologist route. Like what part of you mentioning that anesthesiologist requires your personality fit that? Like, what is it? What is the stereotype, I guess?
Well, already I didn't use these words, but I have a high risk tolerance. Like I wasn't in medicine because it was a super conservative thing where you knew you could make good, there's a lot of reasons why people choose medicine. I didn't choose medicine for any of those things. And my entire pathway there was always like, oh, that's something really exciting. Would love to do it. And, here's a way that I could still doing healthcare. I thought it was going to be like a fellowship, maybe a quick year, maybe a year and a half, then I go right back into medicine. But what an unbelievable opportunity to have somebody who can teach me the ropes. Like here's how you think about it from a company's perspective. You can organize, you have better access to capital, you have teams of people, and now you affect not just one patient at a time, but whole populations. Man, his pitch was exciting. And that was that. I moved to Boulder. I remember I bought bean and cheese burritos to last me for about a week because I had barely had enough money to get out to Boulder, Colorado. But yeah, once you get settled in, it was a blast. That was a huge learning moment.
Tell me more about what do you do when you end up at Boulder, Colorado? Because is it an offer to start a company or?
Oh, so no, I was his global medical director for Covidien's. It was their respiratory monitoring division, and there was a bunch of projects that I think they needed some work on. But my biggest take home from being there was, the way big companies think about innovation, it didn't make any sense to me. And that's going to be very impactful a little bit later when we do Podimetrics. They kept saying, here's a cool laser. What do we do with it? Or here's a camera we could put at the end of this. Like, gosh, what could we do with it? That's so cool. And I remember I'd be sitting with the engineering teams, and the question that could come up is like, what are the problems we should be thinking about? Maybe the problem this laser solves isn't that big of a deal. That's heresy there, right? Like, no, guys, this is a really cool laser, John. What do we do with this laser? And that was, so that was a big part of it. I remember people kept using these phrases like NPV, and it gave me hives to even hear these things. And I knew I needed to get more exposure to that.
Cash flow.
Yeah, none of that made any sense to me. I was medical affairs, so I was more on the problems and data and how do we talk to it. And then worked briefly 3 months as an anesthesiologist with the dream that I would be going to business school and then on weekends go back to University of Pittsburgh to do cases. And then I came off deferment to go to MIT to finally learn this business language, and that'll kick off the next big part of my career.
So you got to get all the degrees you want.
I didn't actually finish my MBA, and my parents were literally placing bets what was going to be the next degree I'd try to go after. They thought it was this hysterical joke that I would never actually get a job, but thankfully I did get one. So.
So was it when it seems like the fact that you even want to do MBA, that's the route that you want to go, the path that you want to take. When did the idea for the Podimetrics started? I guess I'm assuming that the fact that you're taking MBA, this is the path that you want. Maybe not even the path that you're thinking.
It wasn't. Just like I came into med school knowing I was going to be a surgeon, I came out an anesthesiologist. I knew I was going to be a VC. Knew it. Of course I was. They're so cool and hip, and of course I'm not cool and hip. But I pictured how cool it'd be to learn about all these companies, and I had a good background in biochemistry. And Elliot Cohen, who's going to end up founding PillPack, this is before he built that up. He said, "Look, we're going to start this thing called hacking medicine. We've never done it before. One weekend you come over. We're going to limit it to 100 people. We're just going to start companies. It'll be a fun weekend event." And I just remember that could be fun. And I almost didn't. It was such a win that I said, "Okay, I'll just do it. I'll do it." And that was probably the second, maybe the third month of school that this weekend event. And holy smokes, it changed my entire life. Right? I'm not the same person coming out of it than I was going into it. And I immediately realized that I'm not wired that way. I get obsessive about something. I want to go really, you kind of keep learning, and you can't really shake it. You just keep putting more time into it. And I'm wired as an entrepreneur. I'm not a VC, and I love it.
So that weekend, that your life changing moment weekend, when you went in, what light bulb just showed up that weekend? What is that moment?
It's all about problems. Yeah, it's all about a compelling mission. Like, why are we here? That was the amazing thing. Why am I here? David Linders, who's now still our CTO, one of my co-founders, it was his first idea. Foot ulcers, they don't make sense, or he said it something like that. And he had an idea, and our first ideas were just terrible. I mean, it was not, but it was electrifying. So I remember seeing all these patients, and they'd lost a limb, and these were in the VA. I had a lot of exposure to the VA. My dad is a veteran, and grew up with them in the VA, and they I used to think that loss of limb was because of combat trauma, and you realize later in medical school it's diabetes that's doing that. And then I'd be in residency, fast forward a little bit, and I'd spend whole days in the operating room doing nothing but amputations. I kept thinking, like, this is Civil War medicine. If it's disease, you cut it off. Like, fortunately, we don't use saws anymore, but it's still that same idea that it's like cancer. You caught it way too late, and now you're in the operating room seeing me. What a waste! That should never happen. These patients now, they've lost their independence. The 5-year mortality can be as high as 70% in some studies. Like, it kills worse than cancer. It can't happen anymore. It was just such a, like, oh my gosh, it hit me. Like, here's purpose. Here's, like, if we could solve this thing, wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah. So maybe just so that the listener know what technology that Podimetrics is developing and what patient population is serving. Maybe you can tell us more a bit about that before we go back to the subject on how you start.
Yeah, for good context. So Podimetrics now, where we are today, we're a virtual care management company focused on elimination of diabetic amputations. They should not happen anymore. And there's really two parts to what we do. We provide patients with this mat that they step on for 20 seconds a day, and they go on with the rest of their life. That's going to be a critical piece as we think about what are the real problems we need to solve if we're going to dig into diabetic amputations. That collects temperature data and a bunch of other pieces that comes back to us. And then we have a nursing care management layer then is looking for these signals. And if we see any of these signals that sign, that something's going to happen down the road potentially, under coordination with their physician or clinician, we do really quick, very simple targeted prevention therapies instead of doing something for treatment, and it usually prevents the bad outcome from occurring. And then you asked a little bit about the population. Our patient is if you think about the disease progression curve, right, our patients are pretty far to the right. They have, by the time that when you're really concerned about diabetic amputation, they usually have pretty bad heart disease, lung disease, often multiple heart attacks. Their kidneys are hurting, and they've had diabetes poorly controlled for a while. And that's a very important population for us to think about. Like, that's, Atul Gawande, I think, used to call them like hot spotters. They're very high utilizers of the ER, the hospital. How do you build a system that they can use with great regularity so that even at 1 year out, you're going to get, for them, good clinical benefit, and for, of course, the healthcare system, we're creating good value to the system. And we can talk about it, but that was a very unique patient population to have to think about solving for.
This podcast is sponsored by Brown Rudnick's Global Life Sciences Group, a team of legal professionals that help life science companies, lenders, and investors around the world turn good science into good business. Learn more at brownrudnick.com. This podcast is also sponsored by Canon Quality Group. Canon Quality Group has been helping medtech startups set up quality management systems for over 10 years. If you're unsure when to get started with quality management in your startup, turn to the experts at canonqualitygroup.com.
Well, thanks for sharing a little bit of that background description about Podimetrics. You mentioned, so you met your co-founder on that weekend, or do you know him before that? It's just it's like, hey, let's do this thing together on a weekend, and you end up doing something great.
MIT Sloan breaks into big cohorts called oceans, and he was in my ocean, but he was never somebody that he was in a dual degree program. They started a little bit before me, and they kind of hung with each other. They'd already bonded prior to Sloan, so I never really interacted with him. I'd seen him. I mean, he was spooky bright, and he's a very principled. He's a good human being, and so as soon as it was him, that of course added to it. That he seemed like somebody I would enjoy just working with. And there were 5 of us that sat down at the table, and many times in hackathons you don't necessarily control who sits down. an interesting part about building a company from a hackathon company. Just 5 strangers sit down. You hope you work out well. And yeah, but I still work with them to this day. He's a really good friend.
That's great, because I think there's a lot of randomness and there's a lot of chaos, but I think at some point there's an organized chaos that needs to happen, I think. So after that weekend, you and David decide like, hey, there's a lot of opportunity here that you can make a difference and make an impact. So what's next? Like, you just get together, drop off, because you said you didn't finish your degree. It's like you just hop onto this project full time, and what?
Yeah, it's now I get to coach a lot of teams, and I think the number one thing that kills teams is team. It's not the idea. They all have brilliant ideas, and we did the one step that I hope every hackathon team does. You meet again another day. And we actually had something that was so easy to make. It made it so much easier. The deadline for the MIT 100K competition, the elevator pitch, it's like a year-long competition. MIT divided into 3 steps. It's for the entire university. And the deadline for the first competition was like that next day. And we're like, oh, well, let's just keep doing it. Okay, we enjoyed our time. We entered, and then we were. That was the framework. MIT has a lot of these resources, like any other big university, and it really kind of kept pulling us along and almost coaching us through. But we ended up doing well in that one. We won the audience choice, and we were runner up to the first place. Not that I still hold a grudge, but I totally do. And then then the second competition came along. This will be big for us. What we didn't realize is that we had a lot of problems in our idea. Business model actually didn't make any sense. That there was all these things we didn't figure it out. We couldn't even get into the second competition after everyone kept saying, "Gosh, guys, you're going to destroy the whole thing. You are the favorites." And then to not even get in, we had people on the team that it's easy to be on a team when everyone's like winning and everyone's saying how smart you are. When you realize you have potentially a dud, a lot of people we really refocused the team. And that was such a key thing. We identified, we picked up Brian Peterson, he's our chief scientist, one of my co-founders, still an amazing human being. And we rebuilt to find the exact people we needed. And from there, once the team really settled into place, man, we were up and running. And I did finish my first year. I didn't drop out immediately, which I'm sure made me a very interesting teammate in the second semester. Is like, all I'm doing now is like thinking about feet and not whatever it is that we're supposed to be thinking about. And then I end up dropping out to try to, let's raise around. Let's see if we can't get this thing up and running.
Yeah, no, I like that your story. I think sometimes when you hit a roadblock, it allow you to refocus your effort and think through it differently. And, I always said that the roadblock help you get better. And without the roadblock, actually, things doesn't move forward, which is kind of weird, but
it's so true.
But I still don't like roadblock. I wish there's no roadblock.
Yeah, everyone needs a good bad beat early on, I think. The team really doubles down. It gives you some reason why you have it's such a wonderful moment, this terrible moment. And, we look back on it with like such a critical piece of our history, but at the time it was terrible.
Right. I think when you face it, you feel like, dang it. But then when it's over, it's like, I'm glad that happened. That's, which is usually how things are. So you get your first seed round. And how tough did you find that when you first started?
Well, I was already talking to VCs early on, and what I kind of, I don't know if the right way to do it, but getting their engagement early on and allowed them to really punch the thing in the face a bunch. You kind of get a sense of what you need to work on. The amazing thing is when you went back to them, if you fix those issues, like, okay, wow, this is a team that seems to, take good coaching and seems to get things done. So that was a good learning, is visit them early, be okay, be vulnerable, let them, find out what the real issues are, because then you know what to work on. But when we actually raised, when we were in, so we finished the first year. Rock Health had their one, and this is back when they were an accelerator. They had their one and only class out here in Boston. It was at the Harvard Medical School. So we did that program. And the day before demo day, we were talking to my VC, and they go, okay, here's the deal we want. Otherwise, we're going public. We're telling everyone. And we got the term sheet signed. I think it was like either the evening or the afternoon before demo day. And then that was it. We still had to close the round and get through all the diligence he wanted, but it's probably pretty smart on his part. But we were up and running.
Right. I think when there's urgency, everybody seems to do something.
Yeah.
And I think the ability to create different urgency in your favor.
That was good. It helped. Yeah. And like to go into demo day and you're like kicking back. Yeah, we got our term sheet. And, again, it was pretty clever on his part too, because now we're on a path. But it was Aaron Sandusky. He's one of the most another amazing human beings. He is a huge part of this company, a huge friend, and I just like it. We kind of lucked out when we came across Aaron at that time. He was just the perfect.
Yeah, no, he's great. And we had him give a talk early this year, I believe. And our last month, I don't even remember. But yeah, so he's great. He's wonderful.
Yeah.
So where is the company now? Like what stage you guys? Because your product is out.
Yeah.
Helping patients already.
Yeah, now it's at a different, like we've gone through all these stages and we did do it in a very, we wanted to do it as a medical device. We wanted it regulated. We wanted the extra rigor. We wanted, I'm a physician and I wanted more clinical data than many, like it's very hot to say, let's just go to market and, we don't need data. We'll create data that's out there. I wanted to go through the clinical trials. And now what that means is, we're on market now. Let's get right to that spot. We're selling, we're sort of at this scaling phase. But now we have the advantage of having, clinical studies, and we have a good understanding of where it works. We have a good understanding of how well it works. We know how to model it. That changes everything when you're out now selling it. When you can sit down, with actuarial data and say, look, here's how it impacts your population. It's made it. It's if I were to do it over again, I don't know. I'd probably do the same way. It's been good to see it.
So I know that you mentioned a little bit that your product is being used by the patient in the VA. Tell us a bit more about that process, how you get into the VA first. Because I think oftentimes when companies start with the technology, they usually don't pick the VA as their first.
That was our first partner. The way we work, right? You generate savings. And our patient is the one that has challenges with access. We didn't want the patient to have to pay for this. We wanted to make sure that regardless of socioeconomic background, that we could make sure we were good, whether they had access to internet, it had to work in every one of those patients. And it was the payer that made the most sense then to do this with. So there was no even copays, or we wanted to make sure that was all taken care of. One of the greatest pairs to even think about is the VA. I don't think most people see it that way. In fact, I think every VC we were talking to in subsequent rounds told me I was crazy for engaging with the VA. The phrase you hear over and over again, and the VA probably doesn't like this phrase, is if you know one VA, you know one VA. And that's so true. They're working to make that better, but it's hard to scale in that type of environment where you solve one VA's problems, but that's one of 150. There's another 149 to figure out. But we knew it was the right place to be. It was, it's one of the largest payers in the nation, potentially in the world. It's very physician-led, unlike in a big, make a Medicare Advantage. If the docs really do want something, they can help drive the need for a system like that. They're good, oddly enough, counterintuitively, they're really good early partners. You can do your research with them. You can help build your system there. It was just the right place to be. And then most important is mission-wise. Here's a population that they did so much for us. And in many ways, they're really, especially the Vietnam era veteran, they're a very vulnerable population. High rates of, smoking, COPD, heart disease. Their rates of diabetes. 1 in 4 veterans have diabetes, including the kids. 1 in 4 veterans have diabetes there, and have high rates of foot ulceration, this wound that causes amputations. It was the right place to be for mission, even though everyone told us it was, don't go there. It was the right place to be.
So what prompted you to go to the VA, even though everybody said don't go there?
We started as our first clinical trial. It was a 7-center trial, and there was a VA clinician who first said, look, we should do a study here. Let's figure this out. And she introduced us to a number of sites, and suddenly, she got it. She understood it. She had an instant, we shouldn't have amputations anymore. So we got it started as a clinical trial. We're meeting with our clinicians, and then fast forward when it was ready, when we had FDA clearance, and where should we try to go into first? Like, come bring it to us. It made the PIs became your biggest champions. What an unbelievable thing that they would say, yeah, of course you bring it to us. We would take it.
Right. So what is the process that you have to go through to get the adoption for the VA? I mean,
here's how I would coach to it. We had to figure this out, and it took us longer because we were, having to kind of figure out the pathway for a small company to engage with the big administration. But I think the real key is you do start with one VA, and you do solve that VA's problems. You figure out workflow, you figure out how it integrates. It depends on the nature, of course, the technology you're bringing to them. And then you go for the second one, and it'll be a little bit different. And you got to get in there. What you're going to try to do, though, is build up maybe 4, 5, 6 sites with doctors who are ideally that they're like you're really strong champions. And then with that, you can start to try to bring it up to national. You can try to engage VA Central Office FACO. There's an amazing organization that really came along after we had started there, called the Innovation Ecosystem. They have a network of innovators sites that can help try to pilot technologies. They have an ability to create connections across the network, within even leadership. And the best way to get to them then is to have, again, 4, 5, 6 doctors saying, like, we have to have this. That's what they need to say. Yeah, guys, we need to scale this enterprise wide. And they're an amazing partner then to say, okay, how do we get to every veteran who's eligible? How do we do it? They'll get their hands in dirty. It's an amazing group, but to get them to really work well, I think you need to get that. There's no shortcut. You got to build up some grassroots support.
Yeah, no, I mean, for this year, Rosamond Innovators, we partnered with the VA San Francisco, again, with the whole idea is that company will get the insight, understanding about how to work with the VA. And hopefully they are working towards getting some of the company piloted or studied in the VA so that their patient population can benefit from this new technology.
Now, I'm thrilled that you're even doing your part to help get more technologies into the VA, because it is such a population that it's such a rewarding population to be able to help.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of the VA because I one time told Tom Osborne about the only time that you hear the news about the VA is when things are not working well. But when things are working well, the population seems not to know. I think that's what happened with public institution. I guess government, like, people only complain when things are not working.
Yeah, success is silent, right? You don't hear that part of it, but
right. I mean, when you think about the patient records, the VA started it out first, right? The EMR, the electronic medical records. The VA had it for years before anybody else.
I think amputations in many ways is a good analog. And amputation prevented makes no sound. No one knows that it wouldn't have happened. Just like they do a lot of work, but what really gets amplified, of course, those, I mean, they're not perfect. Those are the moments that get amplified. But some of the amazing work that they do just kind of goes silent.
Yeah. So how many VA has your technology been deployed to?
We're probably over 40 at this point, moving across. And I like the idea of you really get to solve. You figure out, eventually you start to it gets generic, where it's now easier to onboard sites. You don't have to keep figuring out each individual VA. And now we're at a spot that's the case. But we really try to concentrate on certain areas. We don't want to just start spreading it out. We want to make sure we have a good operational ability in each site. And it's been working great.
So what's next after the VA?
Oh my God. So first of all, the VA is still a wonderful place, and we're going to continue to work there. They put out a recent blog post as we get a sense of, how well this thing can work in that population. And they found that near complete elimination of all major amputations. And I think it was like a 92% reduction in diabetic foot-related hospitalizations. That was a big thing for us. The VA spends around $3.2 billion each year on diabetic foot disease. And 2/3 of that are these inpatient charges. So I still think there's a lot of work. We need to continue to work with the administration. Again, that population, we have to be able to help that population. That's worth it's an important part. But outside that, there's still like a number that's what I think VA is about 5% of the of our market as a whole. We work typically with, our patient is usually a Medicare eligible patient, and Medicare Advantage is an amazing sort of segment where, they're, given that they're fully at risk, they think about prevention, they think about things and can do things that, typical Medicare, they're not structured to do so. So they've also been amazing partners as we think about getting out to the many members that and many people that need us.
So I know that another, closed systems like the VA and then the Kaiser Permanente is another one. Is it something that of interest for them to adopt Podimetrics?
Yeah, that was the immediate next place, of course, was, what's another large integrated health system? Kaiser's an absolute no-brainer. Here's another place. Now we didn't go there because of that case. We ended up, a clinician who had been following our research reached out and just wanted to know could he bring it in the system, and that led off a whole series of conversations. Well, gosh, how do we get into Kaiser Permanente? And there's a lot of work you got to do. They say that the sales cycle for a health plan can be as much as 12 months, 18 months. And I think Kaiser could probably be at they're famous for being at the slower end of that process. But I think when we had a good clinician champion, yet again, that's another great way to think about attacking any of these places. A good clinician champion was able to get us to the people we needed to talk to, and we could build up a program there.
So are you in the process of trying to get, are you in the process with Kaiser? Are you allowed to say anything in that realm?
I won't be able to talk about, we're in contract, but I won't be able to talk about that.
Okay. But one of the things that I thought that what is interesting about the Podimetrics is about the simplicity of it. And I think when we talk about the VA and the access, tell us more about how you think about that. Because I think sometimes being in the Bay Area, we assume everybody have certain technology, but that's not always true.
Triple aim is a powerful thing. And the third piece of it is access. That's such an important part. How do we get to the patients who need it most? And I think that's a challenge that companies, we should be actively trying to build solutions exactly for those populations. And with Kite, when we did a clinical trial with them as part of our commercial evaluation, and we just allowed them to roll whoever they'd want. It was a pragmatic design. All we did was just operate the account. It wasn't like a trial where you have clinical research associates, doing filling out forms and such. It's just let's operate the account and then let's see how well it did. And where did they go? They got to, it was a largely African American population in their region. That's critical for us. If I haven't already mentioned it, you look at the patient population who gets diabetic amputations, it's one that is marked with significant inequity, right? It's, Black Americans are 3 times more likely to get amputation than white Americans. Same with, many of the other, racial economic minorities or patients with lower socioeconomic background. We have to solve it for that group. And that was a key piece. The device had to work in any environment. And now it's just cellular enabled. You don't need a smartphone. You don't need Wi-Fi. I think that was a big piece because I think, many of these patients, JAMA put out a recent study of 41% of Medicare beneficiaries lack either an internet-capable phone or computer. So I think a lot of companies that are quick to think, well, let's just give them another app or a wearable or something like that, and assume that this population is going to be able to, instantly adopt that. And I think you kind of have to take a step back and what are their needs? How do they do their workflow, and then adapt to them instead of pushing out, a hip solution to them. But I think once we started to figure that out, that it had to work anywhere. That ideally you're getting to the patient populations who can't necessarily get to the ER or to their primary care as easily. That's why they're bouncing in and out of the ER and the hospital. Designing for them, I think, was critical for us, and we've had. I'm happy to tell you even about we've seen some amazing results out of KP, and it's been really exciting to see it up and running.
Yeah, that's great. One of the things would probably people ask you a question because your technology is about every morning the patient just step on and for 20 seconds, and then you see another company like Livongo who also tell people to step on. And how is yours technology compared to theirs, and is that something that you think eventually they're going to step onto your territory?
it's interesting, right? It was a health plan who first drew this disease progression curve, and then sort of mapped different companies to this spot. They always had you might add Omada early on in the process, more about let's control weight, let's try to maybe reverse signs. As you moved up, then you bought yourself into Livongo, and we're going to do glycemic control. We're going to give glucometers, and it was about there. And then as they moved further to the right, they always had Podimetrics. And here's this. And we really concentrated on a patient population that those companies weren't. It was this, multiple comorbidity patient who often, the glycemia, they don't even using some of these glucometers they're going to have challenges with. And the healthcare system is, in many cases, we've kind of failed to really deliver good care to them. And everyone more or less sort of stood away from this patient. None of those, that was not a patient that they were going after. It was a great territory for us because we could just solve those issues around usability, workflow. We knew we could have a big impact because this patient population was being more or less ignored by a lot of industry and the healthcare system.
And it costs a lot to the country healthcare system.
Significantly, yeah. Like these patients can be, many tens of thousands in a given year to care for. They're a very expensive cohort.
So before I let you go, it's been really great to learn about your journey in Podimetrics. If you have, 3 advice that you'll give yourself when you were just starting, what would that be?
Oh my goodness!
Like the young Jon Bloom, the young Jon Bloom before.
I wonder how good this one is, but what I would want to tell myself is don't worry too much necessarily what you need to be later on. The world's is gonna find you, is gonna take you to a very exciting place. So I think I was really I wanted to have this big plan, and what I really realized is that I sort of found my way into where I was happiest, and that's a big piece. 2, oh my goodness, is I've enjoyed education. It's not always about what you're learning. I just like the people that I'm around, and that's right why my parents have made so many jokes like he's going to try to go for another degree. It's such an inspiring community. I love the community of these places. Now I get it in our company, we try to create that same environment, but that's been an exciting spot. And then probably 3 is when you realize that your band may not make it on the big show, feel free to, you can, maybe hop out of music a little earlier. It's probably a good piece of wisdom.
That's great. And I know you mentioned that you want to be a musician. What music instrument do you play? Or
so back when I had hair, I could spike it. I was a punk drummer. All I rarely did was trying to be that crazy. And I loved drums. And I drive everyone, I'm sure, nuts when I'm going to find something I can knock out a quick rhythm. And but it was an interesting community. We got to see a bunch of bands who became huge. We got to watch them become big right in front of us. And our band, we struggled. We weren't quite as amazing as they were. And it was just an amazing environment to be. But thankfully, I found medicine, and it was a lot more of an exciting place.
Well, that's great. And sounds like you're really enjoying the time that you're doing with, growing Podimetrics. So thank you.
It's been humbling and amazing. Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to get the chance to chat with you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Health Technology Podcast. We want to thank our executive producer, Herminio Neto, our content writer, Casper Mossman, and our podcast engineer, Andrew Rojek. If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. The Health Technology Podcast is available on all major platforms.